You walk into a room, no fanfare, no theatrics, no announcement of your arrival. Yet somehow heads turn. Some glance with curiosity, others with suspicion, and a few with something else entirely, something electric, inexplicable, magnetic. You didn't say a word. You barely even looked up. Still, the atmosphere shifted as if your presence tilted the very axis of reality. Why? You're not the tallest man there. You're not the richest. You don't have the flashiest suit or the loudest laugh. And yet, you feel it. That eerie gravitational pull between you and the world around you. A silent voltage. What is that? This is not charisma in the textbook sense. It's not charm manufactured by witty lines or a rehearsed smile. It's not the sculpted physique or designer labels society parades as attractive. No, this is something older, something primal, ancient. It's the sort of allure that doesn't beg for attention, but commands it through sheer resonance. And here's the paradox. Most men who possess it don't even know they have it. They don't walk like gods. They walk like men who have seen gods and decided they were unimpressed. They don't seek validation, they move like men who have already survived their own judgment. And they don't try to be attractive. That's what makes them irresistible. But this is where the mind recoils. Because everything we've been taught about male attractiveness, about what makes a man desirable, is rooted in metrics, money, status, looks, power. The market economy of mating, quantified like stocks and shares. Yet the most dangerous, most quietly compelling men often operate outside this matrix entirely. Their power is metaphysical, psychological, aesthetic, not in the sense of beauty, but in the sense of essence. So, here comes the unsettling question. What if being a highly attractive man has nothing to do with what you acquire, and everything to do with what you radiate? But then, how do you measure the invisible? How do you quantify a presence? How do you know if you possess this force? This strange alchemy that bends space without explanation? Consider this. Have you ever noticed how people speak differently around you? Slightly more deliberate, slightly more cautious, as if words carry more weight in your presence? Have you ever been met with unsolicited confessions, emotional outbursts, or irrational jealousy, none of which you invited, yet all of which follow you like shadows? Have you ever felt, beneath the noise of day-to-day life, that you are observed more than you observe? These are not accidents. These are signs, markers of something you may not fully understand, but which others feel with acute intensity. Here's the twist. Such men often doubt themselves the most, because their attractiveness is not born from ego, but from depth. And depth is isolating. When you no longer conform to shallow expectations, you begin to embody something unsettling to others: authenticity. And authenticity, in a world addicted to illusion, is both intoxicating and terrifying. You become a mirror. You reflect not who people are, but who they pretend to be. And for many, that's unbearable. But this isn't just about romantic allure. This is about power, influence, the capacity to move others without touching them, to reshape dynamics with a glance, to be a force that makes others question themselves simply by standing still. And yet, ask yourself, if you do possess this strange magnetism, why does it often feel like a burden instead of a gift? Why do people project their wounds onto you? Why do you attract both admiration and animosity in equal measure? Why does your silence speak louder than other men's noise? Could it be that attractiveness, true, existential attractiveness, isn't a blessing, but a responsibility? To walk through the world as a man who awakens unconscious energies in others means carrying the weight of their discomfort, their envy, their fascination. It means being misjudged, misinterpreted, misunderstood. And it means standing firm anyway. But before we explore the 10 signs, Before we unravel the threads of this complex tapestry, we must first confront a darker reality. Why is it that the world is designed to keep men like you asleep to their own power? Why are you told to chase when you were born to draw? Why are you taught to impress when your true power lies in expression? Why are you trained to perform when your gift is simply to be? Because once a man discovers that his attractiveness is rooted not in the external, but in his depth, his detachment, his clarity, he becomes untouchable, not because he builds walls, but because he doesn't need to. He becomes immune to the games, to the posturing, to the marketplace of validation. He becomes free, and freedom, for a man, is the most attractive thing of all. So now, we stand at the edge of a deeper question, one that will take us beyond mirrors and masks, into the psychological and philosophical roots of male attractiveness. What is the hidden mechanism, the silent puppeteer, that determines why some men are felt before they are even noticed? Let us descend. But remember, once seen, you cannot unsee. Once known, you cannot unknow. This isn't about gaining something. It's about remembering something you were conditioned to forget. The signs are real, but first, you must see the strings. There is no greater tragedy than a man unaware of his own fire. And so many burn quietly, brilliantly, even beautifully, beneath layers of silence, cynicism, and social masks. You may think the world rewards true attractiveness, that once you possess the essence, this elusive gravitational quality, you'll be celebrated, admired, wanted. But here lies the first illusion. The world doesn't nurture the truly attractive man. It fears him, it resents him, and above all, it seeks to distract him from himself. Let's go deeper. When you were a boy, chances are you were not asked, what is the texture of your mind? What is the weight of your thoughts? Instead, you were asked to perform. Be nice, be good, be quiet, be strong, but not too strong. Show ambition, but not intensity. Be interesting, but not mysterious. Show confidence, but only if it's charming, not unnerving. Do you see the contradiction? Masculine beauty is born from inner congruence. Yet society trains you to fragment yourself. To be liked, you must forget parts of yourself. To be accepted, you must become less whole. This is not an accident. It is a psychological design. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to meet the expectations of the world. But behind the mask lies the shadow, the rejected parts of your personality, buried in shame, fear, and unexpressed rage. And here's the twisted irony. Your true attractiveness doesn't come from the persona. It comes from the shadow. Let that sink in. The very qualities you were taught to suppress, your intensity, your solitude, your sensuality, your hunger for meaning, are the very things that make you magnetic, because they are real. And we live in a world where reality has become a rare and dangerous currency. Take a moment. Think of the men who haunt history, literature, philosophy, not the warriors or emperors, but the ones whose presence shifted cultures. Nietzsche, who stared into the abyss and didn't blink. Schopenhauer, who rejected the lie of human progress and embraced suffering as truth. Sartre, who proclaimed that existence precedes essence and that man is condemned to be free. These were not socially charming men. They were not adored for their compliance. They were attractive in the truest sense. They attracted attention, obsession, criticism, devotion, because they embodied their truth, even when it scorched everything false around them. Now ask yourself, who are you beneath the adaptations? Beneath the job title, the rehearsed humor, the silent insecurities? Who is the man you became before the world told you what manhood should be? If you feel a certain restlessness when you're alone, if you feel a tension between who you are and who you perform, If you've ever watched yourself smile at something meaningless and felt sick inside, then that's not dysfunction. That's awakening. Let's talk psychology. Attractiveness isn't merely a matter of appearance. It's perception, how others feel when they encounter you. And what shapes perception? Neurology, evolution, emotion. When someone meets a man who is unconsciously rooted in his own values, who moves without over-explaining, who listens with the stillness of presence, who speaks not to impress, but to reveal, their brain detects danger. Not physical danger, existential danger. Because this man is unaligned with the collective sleep. He threatens comfort. He awakens longing. He represents what could be, and therefore reminds others of what they are not. And so what does society do to such men? It labels them. Too intense, too cold, too arrogant, hard to read, emotionally unavailable. But beneath those labels is a deeper truth. They are simply unwilling to be tamed. And here's where the tragedy takes root. Because after enough years of being misunderstood, many such men choose to go dormant. They numb their passion. They dilute their honesty. They perform a version of themselves they know will be accepted, even if it kills them slowly. But make no mistake, this is not a loss of attractiveness. It is a suppression of radiance. And that radiance? It comes from alignment. When a man aligns with his values, his purpose, his contradictions, he emits something that no cologne, no luxury watch, no social media presence can replicate. It's the kind of presence that alters the tone of a room, that silences superficial conversation, that draws stares without seduction, that makes people curious, confused, and compelled. But alignment is not easy. It is a crucifixion of comfort. Because to align with your essence is to betray your conditioning. It is to walk away from applause and into solitude. It is to become sovereign, even if it means becoming alone. And here lies the psychological root of the problem. We are not afraid of being unattractive. We are afraid of being too powerful to be understood. Because being understood is safe. But being felt, being truly felt, demands exposure, vulnerability, authenticity, and that kind of openness, that kind of honesty, requires the death of the ego. So here we are, at the edge of a deeper truth. You were never meant to compete in the hierarchy of artificial attraction. You were meant to disrupt it, not through rebellion, but through remembrance. You were born with a fire that cannot be mimicked, a presence that cannot be explained, a voice that doesn't ask to be heard, but echoes through silence. And that is why the world trained you to forget. But you are beginning to remember. And now you must ask yourself, if I were no longer afraid of being fully seen, what kind of man would I become? Hold that question close, because in the next part, we will confront the hidden consequences of forgetting and the invisible toll it takes on your life, your relationships, your very sense of self. You walk through your days, not knowing that half the people around you are reacting not to you, but to the version of you they've constructed in their minds. That quiet tension in their voice, the passive aggression in their compliments, the discomfort in their eyes when you hold silence. A second too long, it's all feedback, but not of who you are. It's feedback to who they can't quite make sense of. Because when you carry an untapped magnetism, when you are a highly attractive man and don't even realize it, you trigger something in the world, something unseen, something unspoken, something dangerous. Let's get honest. The world doesn't know how to love what it cannot control. And this is the invisible punishment for being deeply attractive in ways the world does not know how to name. You get punished not for what you do, but for what you are. There's no crime more unforgivable to the unconscious than authenticity. Because you can't be bribed by approval. You can't be coerced into neediness. You don't play the game. And so, the system turns on you. Here's how. You start attracting projections instead of people. The emotionally neglected see you as their rescuer. The insecure see you as a threat. The manipulative see you as a challenge. The lonely see you as salvation. And those who hide behind performance see you as a mirror, and they hate you for it. This is the hidden cost of radiance. People don't see you clearly. They see their relationship to power in you. You will be adored by some and misunderstood by many. And in the gap between those extremes, you might begin to wonder if something's wrong with you. You will be adored by some and misunderstood by many. And in the gap between those extremes, you might begin to wonder if something's wrong with you. But here's the truth. You're not broken. You're untranslated. And in a world that speaks in noise, silence is both mysterious and terrifying. This leads to a psychological rupture, subtle but devastating. You begin to shrink yourself in response to others' discomfort. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny just to ease tension. You soften your gaze because it makes people nervous. You lower your standards because your presence already feels like too much. You apologize for simply existing fully. And before you know it, you've built a cage inside your own mind. A cage where your power is kept in check. Your voice edited, your instincts doubted. This is not a coincidence. This is a response to being attractive in a way no one prepared you for. You were conditioned to crave connection. But the more you radiate, the more others project. And the more they project, the more you lose real connection. So what happens? You begin to isolate. Not physically, perhaps, but existentially. You stop explaining yourself. You stop trusting compliments. You stop expecting people to really see you. And that, right there, is where the tragedy deepens. Because the moment you stop being seen, you begin to forget that you were ever meant to be. And this, friend, is where the world wins. Because now, you're not dangerous anymore. You've been neutralized, not by force, but by misunderstanding. You don't start revolutions. You blend in. You don't pierce illusions. You scroll past them. You don't walk with purpose. You wander with practiced indifference. And all the while, the world breathes easier. Because the one thing the world fears, more than chaos, is the presence of a man who remembers his essence. But even now, even in this sleep, your soul is not quiet. There are flashes, moments. You catch your reflection in a window, not checking your looks, but sensing a stranger. You feel your heart stir in conversations that require no lies. You feel your body tighten in rooms where everyone's pretending. And somewhere in your chest, a voice you thought long buried whispers, "This isn't who I am." You may not know what the alternative is, but you know this. You were not born to be digestible. You were born to provoke truth by your presence alone. And here lies the final, cruel paradox. The less you know how attractive you are, the more dangerous you become. Because your authenticity is raw, untamed. You haven't learned to harness it, market it, weaponize it. And so, you become a living contradiction, a man who affects people deeply without understanding why, and who suffers silently because of it. Relationships become confusing. You attract intensity before intimacy. You become a magnet for extremes, obsession or avoidance, loyalty or betrayal, praise or rejection. And all of it feels exhausting, because no one teaches you that being deeply attractive is not about pleasure, it's about pressure. You don't carry desirability, you carry weight. People confide in you things they've never told anyone. They fall in love with your mind before they understand it. They fear the way you look at them, not because you're judging, but because you see. This is the unseen consequence of radiating your essence in a world trained to fear it. And unless you wake up to it, unless you see it for what it is, you will slowly erode yourself into someone safer, smaller, quieter. You will exile your power to avoid being misunderstood. You will dilute your spirit so others can swallow you. You will bleed silently so others won't feel wounded. But let me tell you something the world never will. Your presence was never the problem. Their fear was. And the longer you bend to their fear, the more you betray your fire. So now we stand at the final threshold. You've seen the signs. You've felt the fracture. You've tasted the loneliness of misunderstood magnetism. But now comes the revolt. Not against them. Against the version of you who agreed to all of this. Against the lie that said you were too much. Against the silence you wore like armor. The rebellion begins not with fury, but with remembrance. In the next section, we will rip the veil off the lie you were sold. We will walk into the fire of authenticity, not to be admired, but to be whole. We will take back what was always yours, your essence, your voice, your freedom. It does not begin with shouting. It begins in silence. The kind of silence that feels like holding your breath. Before walking into a room where you're finally going to say what you've never dared to speak. This is not the rebellion they taught you to fear. Not the one with fists and fury. Not the war fought against systems or institutions. This is the rebellion within. Because here's the great, hidden truth. You don't become a highly attractive man by adding more. You become one by stripping everything false away. You stop chasing and start remembering. And remembering is not gentle. It is a violent clarity, a sacred disruption, a return to the self you exiled to fit into a story that was never yours. Let me be precise. If you want to reclaim your presence, your radiance, your power, you must first destroy the lie that told you ever lost it. The world made you forget on purpose. Because a man who remembers who he is, deeply, cannot be bought, cannot be flattered, cannot be manipulated. He cannot be seduced by shallow power or broken by surface rejection. So what does the rebellion look like? It begins with a single, terrifying act. You stop performing. You stop curating your soul to match the mood of the room. You stop minimizing your truth to preserve others' comfort. You stop proving, persuading, polishing your edges. And you begin, simply being. This sounds small, but it is seismic. Because the moment you decide to sit in your full essence, your contradictions, your intensity, your calm, your sensuality, your solitude, people will feel it, even if they don't understand it. You begin to attract not attention, but resonance. You begin to notice that the right people feel like silence, not noise. You begin to see that those who once misunderstood, you were never meant to carry your truth. And you stop craving their approval like a thirsty man drinking salt water. But there's more. The rebellion requires you to confront a deeper fear, that you might be extraordinary, not in the narcissistic sense, but in the unbearable realization that you were never meant to be average. You were not born to just survive, to obey, to blend. You were born to disrupt, to carry a frequency others forgot existed. That frequency is your deepest authenticity. And authenticity is not a style. It's not an attitude. It's not being real. It is spiritual nakedness. It is standing in your truth when it costs you applause. It is walking away from anything that forces you to betray yourself, even if it promises comfort. Let me show you how this begins in practice. 1. You reclaim your solitude. Solitude is not loneliness. It is the training ground of presence. You stop fearing your own mind. You sit with it. You confront it. You sharpen it like a blade in the dark. Every truly attractive man carries solitude like a scent, unmistakable, alluring, unshakable. 2. You speak less, but mean more. You stop over-explaining. You let silence finish your sentences. You understand that energy speaks louder than volume. That stillness is a form of power. 3. You live with deliberate contradiction. You can be intense and kind, stoic and warm, wild and wise. You no longer force yourself to make sense. You become poetry instead of propaganda. 4. You master your boundaries. You stop being available to chaos. You stop offering your presence to those who do not honor it. You learn to say no without explanation and yes without guilt. 5. You embrace your desire without apology. Sexuality, ambition, mystery, depth. These are not sins. They are signals of aliveness. You do not contort them to seem safe. You integrate them to become whole. But perhaps most important of all, you stop asking for permission to be powerful. You give yourself authority to be the man you know you are beneath the conditioning. And the moment you do, the world changes. Not because it becomes easier, but because you no longer belong to it. You begin to belong to yourself. And when you belong to yourself, you radiate something rare. Sovereignty. It is the most attractive force a man can emit. Because it says, I don't need to be chosen. I already chose myself. You begin to walk through the world not as someone trying to prove his worth, but as someone who remembers it. You stop competing because you realize you are not in the same game. You are not trying to win attraction. You are attraction, not because you demand attention, but because your alignment makes everything else feel off-key by comparison. This is what happens when a man rebels against his own forgetfulness. He becomes a lighthouse. He doesn't chase the ships. He doesn't plead to be seen. He simply stands, anchored, radiant, undeniable. And those who are meant to find him do. Let this be your awakening. You were never too much. They were simply too asleep. You were never too intense. They were too conditioned to feel. You were never unattractive. You were unclaimed. So now, claim yourself. Walk back into your skin as though it were a throne. Speak like every word was carved from truth. Love like you've already lost everything and decided to risk it all again. Move like you're not chasing anything, because you're already home. This is the rebellion. This is how you rise. Not louder, not flashier, but truer. And in a world addicted to lies, nothing is more terrifying or more beautiful than a man who walks in truth. There comes a moment in a man's life when the noise falls away, not because the world has become quiet, but because he has. Not silent in defeat, silent in mastery. And in that silence, he sees clearly, for the first time, what he was chasing, why he felt unseen, why he doubted himself, and why no amount of external validation ever filled the ache. Because here is the ultimate truth. You were never meant to be attractive. You were meant to be undeniable. But this truth comes with a cost, one so high, most never pay it. To be undeniable, you must die, not physically, but symbolically, spiritually. The ego, the image, the masks, the wounds you wear like armor, they must be buried, mourned, burned. This is the ancient rite, forgotten in modern manhood. The inner crucifixion, where you stop being what the world trained you to be and become what you always were. But becoming that man is not a triumph. It is a surrender to a truth so deep, so vast, so utterly disarming. It humbles you into awakening. And that truth is this: there is nothing to prove, nothing to perform, nothing to earn, nothing to seduce. Because what makes you most attractive isn't what you show the world. It's what you no longer need to hide. Not your pain, not your fear, not your brilliance, not your hunger, not your peace. You are not attractive because you make others feel good. You are attractive because you remind them who they could be. You do not seduce. You unveil. And in your presence, people don't feel desire. They feel the void between who they are and who they might become. That is the power that makes you magnetic. Not charm, not success, not bravado, but the echo of someone who has remembered himself. Let's be clear. Most will not understand you. Some will worship you. Others will resent you. Most will project onto you. And a rare few will recognize you. But even among the few who recognize you, only one person truly must. You. Because when you see yourself fully, you liberate yourself from needing anyone else to. This is the end of the war of attraction, the war of identity, the war of trying to be worthy. Because when a man becomes whole, he stops orbiting others and becomes his own sun. And this is what terrifies the world. A man who no longer begs to belong. A man who doesn't compete because he creates. A man who doesn't posture because he possesses. A man who doesn't seduce because he radiates. This man cannot be marketed to. He cannot be manipulated. He cannot be moved by threats or promises, because he already holds the one thing no one can give or take away: his truth. That is the final sign, not found in your posture, your voice, your status, or your gaze, but in the peace that comes when you no longer perform attraction and simply embody presence. In that peace, the world bends. People adjust their energy. Rooms recalibrate, because nature itself obeys what is aligned. You will not always be loved. You will not always be understood, but you will always be felt. And that is something no algorithm, no trend, no facade can replicate. So stand tall, not because you've won, but because you've remembered. You do not need a reason to be radiant. You do not need permission to be powerful. You are not a type. You are not a brand. You are not a role. You are a force. And when you walk with that knowing, not arrogance, but clarity, everything changes. Because you no longer chase the world. You make the world remember itself in your presence. And that is the rarest form of attractiveness. Not the man who is looked at, but the man who awakens. So now we end, not with answers, but with a call. A question that echoes through time. What would your life look like if you stopped fearing your own light? The journey doesn't end here. It begins now. You've seen the signs. You've felt the truth. And now, you must choose to remain safe or to become unforgettable. Because the most attractive man is not the one who is admired. It is the one who is remembered long after he is gone. And if you've made it this far, perhaps that man is already waking up within you.